Good afternoon and welcome to HAR Community Conversations. We're here every month to discuss topics that mean the most to Houstonians, and today we're covering one that I think we're all probably thinking of right now, and that is flood insurance, flood risks, and the NFIP. And joining us today is Gilbert Giron with FEMA. Welcome to the program, Gilbert.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I should say welcome back because you did join us in a live stream about 5 years ago, and I think we're well overdue for an update. What do you think?
I agree.
All right. Well, we have a lot to discuss today, but before we get into it, Gilbert, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do at FEMA.
Hello, my name is Gilbert Giron. I'm the Regional Flood Insurance Liaison for FEMA Region 6 out of Denton, Texas. My primary responsibility is to be the liaison between the National Flood Insurance Program and our policyholders in our five-state area. And that can include anything from disputes about the premiums, claims being delayed, issues with adjusters, congressional inquiries. I handle them all.
Very good. Well, thank you, and thank you for being that liaison. That's wonderful. So let's dive right into it. This might be a misnomer. It might be misinformation or whatever the case is. But there could be a belief out there that homeowners insurance covers everything we need. Does standard homeowners insurance cover flooding or damage from a flood?
That is a great question. I get asked that quite a bit. No, standard homeowners insurance does not cover the peril of flooding. And it's really important for your viewers to understand that there is a difference. Flood insurance is often called a single peril policy. It only covers direct damage related to flood. In most cases, it's rising water. So no, it does not. And unfortunately, people find out the hard way when they're under the impression that the homeowners does provide some coverage until it is their claim is denied, and then they realize the error.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're stuck with those bills, right? So out of curiosity, because I'm sure this number changes, but how many people in the Houston area currently carry flood insurance? And also, has that number gone up or down in recent years?
Yes, so in the Houston area, we have about 101,252 policies written through the National Flood Insurance Program. Now, we don't have the capability to track private products, so there could be more. That equates to about $30 billion of insured coverage in the Houston area. Now, when you add in Harris County, you add on another 76,000 policies. So that area is well protected, and quite understandably, people do understand that there is a significant risk in that geographical location. And the answer to the other question is, we'd see ups and downs on the number of policies in place at any given time. We do see like a roller coaster effect right after a large scale event. For example, after Hurricane Harvey, we saw a large increase in the number of flood insurance policies. That was such a large scale event that people understood and they appreciated the how dangerous water could be. But over the next couple of years, as that memory starts to diminish, people start to reevaluate their expenses, and it's like, well, it's been 3 years, we've had nothing happen. Let's go ahead and let the policies lapse, and we won't renew for another time. So we do see it go up and down, but over the 12-month cycle for the Houston, we are seeing a negative right now. That means we have lost more policies than we have taken in under new business.
Right. And so there is a delay, correct, in when your policy goes into effect after. So let's say I see there's a storm coming in the Gulf. Can I sign up for a policy today and be covered?
No, you cannot. When you sign up for a standard flood insurance policy through the National Flood Insurance Program, there is a standard 30-day waiting period. This 30-day waiting period is to ensure that we learned our lessons back in the mid-'80s when we had what was called the Midwest flood. Mississippi was flooding up north and it was heading downstream. And we didn't have a 30-day wait, and people called. They got full coverage within a week. They flooded. They got full payout, and then we're not able to collect enough premium to help cover those costs. So there is a 30-day, and there's also a category for storm in progress. If we know the event is coming already, we could put a stop on the ability to get new flood insurance business because of a storm in progress.
Okay. I've also heard that if there is a storm in the Gulf, let's say, that policies cannot be written. Is that true? And how long after a storm could you wait? Let's say there was a flood event, but it didn't affect me, but now I want to sign up for flood insurance. Do I have to wait after a storm has taken place?
It would have to be a very substantial event that's in the Gulf to stop the policies from being written.
Mm.
Normally, the 30-day period is more than sufficient. But for example, flood in progress is something that we may experience if there has been large-scale events and we expect water to flow in certain areas, and we're seeing a consecutive rise in waters. That would be when we're not able to write flood insurance. But by far and large, the 30-day wait is on average what we experience.
Okay. So who should consider getting flood insurance?
Ah, well, let me start with this. All right. So when I'm in a live audience, I normally ask my viewers, how many of you live in a floodplain or a flood zone? And I would normally get one or two people to raise their hand. I start laughing. I'm like, remember, I'm kind of a shady character. Let me ask this again. And I get a couple more. Well, when I provided the answers, people open their eyes. It's the entire country in the floodplain. It's just a question of what risk you're in. And no time on any FEMA maps will you ever find something that says this area will not flood. We have learned time after time that if the conditions are right, it can flood anywhere. Look at New Mexico right now, high elevation, flooding massively in the Rio Doso area because of burn scars. So it can flood anywhere if the conditions are right. And with the increase of predictions of rainfall, areas that are not necessarily close to rising water, such as rivers or lakes, but are in low-lying areas, rainfall is a big factor to the flooding in there now. So if you, yeah, everyone can benefit from having a flood insurance policy, and we encourage this. We do have areas that are called X zones, right? Areas of minimal flooding. While 40% of our claims are in these X zones. So there is a big.
Okay. And actually, Lisa did comment X flood zone. So just because you see that you might be in X flood zone doesn't mean no potential for flood, right? What about renters? Do renters need to acquire flood insurance?
Yes. So in our eyes, we either considered a structure a residential or non-residential, okay? And we have either building coverage or we have content coverage. And now let me help explain it like this. If you take the home, put it in the palm of your hand, turn it upside down and shake it, everything that falls out is your content, okay? A lot of people are just, they don't remember how long it took to actually furnish the home to the way it is. It's something that takes a long period of time. So renters can get content only to cover their personal effects inside of apartments that are owned by businesses, and it's really quite affordable for content only. The major cost of flood insurance are insuring building structures. So when we're talking about content, it's very reasonable. So I really encourage renters to reach out to your local insurance agents and talk about a content only flood insurance policy through the NFIP. Make sure you're protected. When these storms come in, these apartment complexes, they will make sure that their units are repaired with no regard to your personal effects.
That makes sense. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about disaster assistance, because some people may think federal disaster assistance will cover any damage that they might have. What is the difference between disaster assistance, what that covers, and what flood insurance would cover?
All right, so this would be perfect time for the slide. But let me start with the disaster assistance. Disaster assistance can only be provided after the event is a large enough disaster to be declared by the president as a presidentially declared disaster. Now, this doesn't always happen, right? So if it does not happen, disaster assistance will not be available at all. Well, flood insurance is a contractual obligation between the National Flood Insurance Program and our policyholder. So all the policyholder has to do to submit a claim is contact their local agent and start the claim process. They do not have to have that declaration. But the big difference is the amount of money received during the disaster. So we put this slide, this presentation together. You can see for the 2024 storms, that the average flood insurance check was $69,295, while the average disaster assistance check was just a little bit over $2,000. Going to Tropical Storm Milda, the average NFIP flood insurance check was 74,000, while the average of disaster assistance was just a little bit over 6,000. And Hurricane Harvey, 118,000 was the average for NFIP flood insurance claims, while just a little bit over $4,000 for disaster assistance. So there is a huge difference in the amount of money received, and this is the flood insurance is meant to help you get back into your way of life, help you repair the direct flood losses. Disaster assistance is meant for the immediate needs that you have. It is not meant to rebuild your entire home. So those the differences in the amount received and requirements are the big differences between disaster assistance and a flood insurance claim.
Okay, thank you so much about that. I just taking a look here to the questions that we have coming in. This was in regard to the suggestion for renters that you mentioned. It says, good comment and usually very cheap to purchase. So we like that. Donna has a great question that I'm going to get to in just a little bit. There was an additional comment here just saying, ask about riders. So do you have any additional comments that you want to make about riders?
I'm not sure what they're referring to. If they add on a rider to a existing homeowners insurance policy, well, some will allow you to write what's called a rider and provide flood insurance coverage. But that would be a private product, and I don't have the capability to speak on those.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. So do you have, and you may have already answered this question, but I would love to reiterate it if we can. Do you have an idea of how often flooding occurs outside of the floodplain?
So it's quite frequent. Every time we have a large scale event, about 40%, now this is nationwide, mind you, 40% of our claims are in these areas of minimal flooding. A lot of people remember the X zones for preferred risk policies are, there's no regulations in play in these X zones. And we're referring to shaded X as well, which is also used to be known as the 500-year floodplain. We are experiencing flooding in these areas quite frequently. And you can think about it like this. The special flood hazard area, the communities who participate in the National Flood Insurance Program have not only agreed, but agreed to enforce regulations. Those regulations help mitigate these houses. Oftentimes they're higher elevation. They're being built on pier piles and post as a foundation as opposed to slab on grade. They're being built with flood resistant materials. The utilities are elevated. None of those requirements are in place for areas of minimal flooding or X zones. So as we increase the mitigation in these areas, the water has to go someplace. And then we also have to take in consideration your area by itself. Houston, all of you have seen your map. You're in a circle within a circle within a circle. A lot of people don't remember, or it's easy to forget that the entire east part of Houston used to be nothing but bayous and wetlands. When you continue to reclaim those bayous and wetlands, the ecosystem, right? That water still has to go someplace. And now it's going to use cement as the path of least resistance, and you're going to experience more and more flooding. So as development continues, the flood maps lose their accuracy, right? So think of our flood maps as a snapshot of time. And when they are provided to the community, it is based on the best available information at that time. But on the first set of construction or development, they slowly lose their accuracy, or up to the point where they're no longer sufficient to be used for regulation purposes.
Yeah. So to that point, if someone doesn't live in a high risk flood zone area, do they still, in your opinion, need flood insurance?
Yes, especially in our state.
Very good. So just taking a look here to see if you have questions for Gilbert, type those in. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can. Does the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, always offer the best deals for homeowners, or should they also seek quotes from private insurers?
All right. So as the insurance guy for FEMA, I want your viewers to be protected. And sometimes we may not have the best rates when it comes to flood insurance. But in some locations, we are the only players. A lot of private
Mhm.
insurance companies have pulled out of areas of high risk. That's one of the reasons the National Flood Insurance Program was created back in 1968, because insurance companies would cherry pick. They would not write in high risk, and they would only take low risk areas. So
Mhm.
we will insure any structure, regardless if it's has prior flood damage, if it's non-compliant, or if it's just recently built. The premiums will reflect. I'm sorry, the risk will reflect off the premiums. So if you're a high risk structure, you expect higher premiums. But we really don't monitor private costs when it comes
Mhm.
to flood insurance. In our eyes, if you're covered, you're covered. We just want you to ensure that you have the coverage needed to meet any requirements for mandatory purchase. Is a law that requires um, homeowners who live inside of a special flood hazard area that their mortgage is touched by federal dollars. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, HUD, right? They have to have flood insurance. Now,
Mhm.
you can have private insurance for that requirement, but it has to mirror the coverage of NFIP.
Okay.
So, in my eyes, I just want your viewers to be covered. Flood
Mhm.
insurance is so vital. So, shop around. You know, when someone asks me where they can go and they get quotes for flood insurance, I tell them floodsmart.gov. Start with your current agent and ask questions. But I ask them to get two quotes. And it's not because you're price shopping. If you get two different quotes from two different agents and they input the same information into our engine, they're going to get the same price. But what you're looking for is knowledge and experience for your agent, because the agent who writes your policy is going to be the same agent who submits your claim. So if they lack the knowledge and experience to write your policy, it just think of it as conducting interviews for your insurance agents.
Mhm. Very good. Thank you for that. Along the same lines, you mentioned about private insurers pulling out of certain high risk areas. We've definitely seen a lot of headlines in the last year or two, especially in areas like Florida and other parts of the country. Have you seen a lot of that in the Houston area?
No, we have not. We see a lot of this happening in the Louisiana area with the insurers pulling out because of the high risks, not just necessarily from flood damage, but wind damage. The last several events in Louisiana were heavily wind
Hmm.
related, and that led to a lot of primary home insurance claims as opposed to flood. We're not experiencing a lot of that in Texas, which is very beneficial.
Hmm.
But both Louisiana and Texas does have very stringent construction requirements in the coastal areas, what we call V zones, and I believe that has helped significantly with the not necessarily the increase of wind and flood insurance premiums in the areas, but also the amount of wind damage when we have what we call minor events.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. So we've all heard the phrase, I've lived here for X number of years and it's never flooded, so I don't need flood insurance. What would you say to somebody that maybe has that mindset?
Okay, so here's something very important to remember about our maps, right? Our flood insurance rate maps are mapped to the 1% level of accuracy. Engineers
Hmm.
can go into more depth, but the cost benefit starts to outweigh, right, the usefulness of this.
Hmm.
So, what that means is more likely that area where that homeowner resides has yet to experience a full 1% event. And when we mean a 1% event, we mean something that exceeds our modeling. And then where we have our flood maps identified as special flood hazard areas, where we anticipate the water to be in a 1%. So, and there are some areas in Houston who have multiple, and not just Houston, but Harris County, have experienced several multiple 1% events a year. And there are some areas around that area, the geolocation, that have yet to experience a single 1% annual event. It's really difficult to predict how the wind patterns blows these storms, but that does not mean that it will never flood in your area. It just means you have not had a 1%. Once again, when the conditions are right, it can flood anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there was a comment that came in that I just wanted to quickly address. Donna said she represents a property that was placed in the FEMA floodplain but hasn't flooded in 40 years. So is this kind of that same mindset you were just saying to the other regard?
Yes, and when it is newly mapped in, a lot of people have questions on why.
Hmm.
Well, when our maps update with new development, I wish we would take more structures out of the special flood hazard area, but on average, we put a lot more in. And that's simply because of the development. The water is channelized, it's localized into very specific areas, and we have, increased areas where we anticipate flooding, moderate to high risk flood events based on our flood insurance rate maps. So yes, even though that structure may not have flooded in 40 years, with the recent development and change in the ground truth, has a possibility of increasing the flood risk in that area.
Okay, very good. One thing I think a lot of people realized after Hurricane Harvey and other recent flood-related events is how truly devastating a flood can be and how long it takes to recover. Why is flooding so different than other natural disasters?
So, how many times have you been watching the news and you'll see people outside walking around in floodwaters, barbecuing, or just playing around, right? That unnerves me all the time because floodwater is horrible stuff. Oftentimes we have septic systems that have been compromised, so we have raw sewage, dead animals, you have toxins, you have chemicals, all that is in this flood water. So when that touches your home, you can't save it. You have to cut a lot of material out. And you can't cut just to where the water line was. You have to go above, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that water has compromised the electrical components, countertops, and there's a lot of materials in modern construction that absorbs water, absorbs moisture. So, and it just can't be cleaned. You have to totally gut everything else. But what takes a significant amount of time for it to be repaired is you have to wait for it to dry. You cannot start repairs when you still have moisture in the walls. That means you have to constantly monitor the dryness levels of the studs, but you also have to treat for mold. You have to make sure it's completely dry, and only then can you start the repair process. And by that time, hopefully you're taking mitigation into consideration, and you want to avoid this level of damage next time. So maybe you're elevating all your electrical components to a higher level. Maybe you're replacing your sheetrock with some type of masonry product that holds up better to flood. Maybe instead of wood floors, you're using some type of masonry-based cement or concrete, right? So by the time you make all these decisions, we're looking about a significant amount of time between the event and the completion of repairs.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that explanation. I want to address a couple comments and questions that came in as we were speaking. A question that just came in actually from Tram: is a detached driveway covered when you buy flood insurance?
No, it's not. Flood insurance is for the structure itself. We won't cover decks, we won't cover driveways, pools, fences, anything like that. It's for the structure and the contents within the structure.
Okay, very good. A question here from Donna: is it possible to have a property removed from the floodplain?
Yes, it is. If you are able to get an elevation certificate that shows that the base foot elevation of that structure is higher than what we call the lowest adjacent grade, then that's a candidate for either a letter of map amendment if it has been done on natural terrain, or if fill has been brought in, it will be a letter of map revision based on fill. And more information can be found online, or you can send me an email. I'll be happy to guide you towards that.
Excellent. Well, that actually takes me to the next question I had for you, which is: how can people learn more about the NFIP and all of the resources that FEMA has to offer?
Floodsmart.gov. It is a catch-all website. It is very informative. It has everything on there on how to buy a policy, to how to help you submit your claim. It has information on how to video capture materials in your home, serial numbers, model numbers. All that is really important because after a flood, we want you to go ahead and start cleaning your home. You need to get all that stuff out of your home. But we need to have evidence of what you had in the home. So there's a lot of helping steps on floodsmart.gov that can help guide you.
Very good. Well, we did share that link in the comments with everyone, and hopefully everybody clicks on that to go learn more. If there are any final questions, type them in now. Now is the time, and we'll get to them. But I wanted to share a couple of comments that came in that I think are really valuable. Lisa said, topography changes, think roads, building asphalt with changes. the runoff, which changes the runoff and drainage by flood insurance. So I'm sure you agree with that, Gilbert. And then another comment here. Thanks for the info. I'm never dropping my flood insurance.
Good.
That's what you want to hear. Well, very good. With that, we did have another question just come in. Apologies. Tram said, is there a different type of flood insurance that you can get if you have rental property? So we addressed this earlier, but if you don't mind repeating, is it the same that you would get for a homestead? So really quick, for renters, what do you recommend?
Okay, so you mean you are the owner, but you rent out the building. Is that correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is, yes, if you have a rental property. Apologies. So not for a renter, okay. For a landlord. Yeah.
Yes. So what we go off of primary residence. So if it's your primary residence, you'll have what's called a surcharge of $25. If it is not your primary residence, you own multiple structures, say Airbnbs, right? The surcharges for those are $250. Mm-hmm. There's also a increase in the amount the flood insurance can increase to hit its full risk rate for a rental property such as this. Our primary concern is your primary home. We want to make sure that that is protected and it's limited. We cannot raise flood insurance premiums more than 18% for your primary residence.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, you mentioned earlier, we discussed the difference between what your standard homeowner's insurance covers and why you also would need flood insurance. Latanya is asking, if your homeowner's insurance offers you flood insurance, would you recommend buying it? So would you recommend getting the policy from the same company where you carry your homeowner's insurance?
So I can't advocate for individual insurance providers. I just ask that you do your due diligence on the coverage. Ask them if it is a NFIP policy or if it's a private product. Ultimately, as I have mentioned, I just want you to be covered. If it's something that you can afford and something that provides the coverage needed for your home, please do what's best for you. But just make sure you have an understanding of the coverage that is being offered to you. And you will get a declaration page, either from the NFIP or private product, which will have a breakdown of the costs and overall coverage.
Very good. If you are in a flood zone and never flooded, why does it increase? So why is the amount increasing if you've never flooded is, I think, what the question's asking here.
Okay, so, unfortunately, risks have increased. My homeowner's insurance has increased multiple times, even though I've never filed a claim. My automobile insurance has increased multiple times, even though I've never filed a claim. It's based off of risk. It's based off of known data. It's based off of catastrophic modeling, right? So even though you may not have ever submitted a claim for flood insurance, we are going off of the risks associated to your structure, right? Individual characteristics of that home. Mm-hmm. So if you live in a higher risk area, you have a larger replacement cost value, you can expect higher premiums. That being said, we are also providing what's called full risk rates. It's on your declaration page, and that is what we anticipate your full risk to be. Once you hit that, the average 18% will no longer kick in. There will be maybe some small increases for administrative or fees and surcharges, but the 18% will no longer be in play.
Okay, thank you for that. Going back to the detached garages really quick. So is the detached garage covered by NFIP insurance? So I think we're just figuring out a way to cover those detached garages here if we can.
No, it is detached, right? So once it is detached from the primarily insured structure, you would have to have a secondary policy for that building.
All right, very good. Thank you for that, Gilbert. Well, Gilbert, you've answered a lot of questions today and provided us with really great information. Of course, we have the link floodsmart.gov in the comments. Please go check that out to learn more about the NFIP and the different resources FEMA has to offer. Is there anything else that you want to share with us today, Gilbert?
Yes. Can I get you to bring up that second slide I provided?
Absolutely.
Okay, so during today, we did discuss the difference between disaster assistance and flood insurance. Please please be able to articulate, especially to any of your customers out there, that there is a big difference, right? Now, one of the things we didn't talk about was the amount of flood coverage. Now, if you have a requirement in place from your lender, you really can't do much on that. It's going to either be the value of the home or the amount of the loan. But if your home is owned outright and you want to get coverage, and you find that the statutory amount of $250,000 is beyond your capability financially, get the flood insurance, get the amount of coverage that you can afford. Even $100,000 is going to be a significant more impact and help you recover than simply waiting on disaster assistance. Reminders, renters can get flood insurance. Please, it is so affordable for those renters. And one last time, every zone is a flood zone. And if the conditions are right, it can flood everywhere.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We have a few people asking how they can get in touch with you, Gilbert.
So at the presentation, well, I didn't give you a presentation. I'm sorry, I did the presentation earlier. I will be more happy to provide you my contact information, and you can disseminate to all your members.
All right, great. We will put that in the comments a little bit later. Well, thank you, Gilbert, for your time today. We really appreciate it. Help us get a little bit better understanding for ourselves, and so that we can better protect our property. So, and a lot of thank yous are coming in in the comments as well. So we truly appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I look forward to maybe interacting more with your association.
Absolutely. Well, okay. We had just a few more thank yous coming in. Just caught my eye there. So that is it for today's HAR Community Conversations. Again, we're here every month, typically the first Thursday of the month, to talk about meaningful things to Houstonians. And we will be back next month. So we will see you then. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.